Shalom and welcome again to Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address. Thank you very, very much for joining us. We do appreciate your time and interest in these podcasts. And if you'd like to make a comment or a suggestion, please feel free to email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. Please go to the website, jewishsacredaging.com, obviously. And for those of you interested in perhaps writing something for the website, we are taking submissions from people from all over. So please feel free to do that. Well, today we are very pleased to welcome to Seekers of Meaning Lisa Pahl, who is a licensed clinical social worker coming to us from beautiful Southern California. And is the owner of something called the Death Deck. Now, before you say, why is Address interviewing a ship's captain from the Death Deck? This has nothing to do, trust me, it has nothing to do with that. But we want to explore with Lisa a very, very interesting product, phenomenon that she created that really speaks to a larger conversation that we've had on Seekers of Meaning many, many, many times. I've had with congregants, and it's part of many of the classes we teach. And I know probably that many of you are walking this walk, have walked this walk, or if you haven't, probably will with somebody that you love and care for sometime in the future. So Lisa, welcome to Seekers of Meaning. I hope you're well and that things are treating you well in Southern California.
Oh, well, I'm so glad to be here today and talk with you. And it is another sunny, beautiful day here in Southern California.
Well, I'm looking out here in New Jersey, and it's just, they don't call us the Garden State for nothing. It's always beautiful in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. So I have here a deck of cards, which I won't shuffle because I'll mess it up, called the Death Deck. So I guess the obvious question is, what in the world is the Death Deck?
Well, I liked your intro that you were going to interview a sea captain because I haven't gotten that before.
Well, it just came to me.
So the Death Deck is a tool to help people have conversations about death, dying, illness, and grief. And we called it the Death Deck because that's what it is. We're really trying to normalize conversations on death and dying. And, we use a lot of euphemisms for the word death. Saying people passed on, all these different ways that we have of talking about death, which can actually give us less of a reality about the fact that we're all going to die. So that's the reason for the name, is we wanted to really tell people what it was. And then the impetus for creating the Death Deck was, I've worked in hospice 18 years. I worked in emergency medicine, and I have witnessed so many people who they have a medical crisis, they have a terminal diagnosis, and there have not been conversations before that moment on what they would want in different medical situations and what would be most important to them as they are dying or approaching end of life. And then the family members are left to come up with, they have to make these decisions, which creates chaos and confusion and conflict between family members who are arguing over whether mom would want the feeding tube or not, those type of questions. And so we decided to create a game that would add a little bit of humor and multiple choice questions to make it easier to approach the topic. This is a deck that you can kind of pull any question and you can get a conversation going with people around you about their thoughts on different topics related to death and dying. And so that was our initial flagship. And it's been incredibly fulfilling to see people use it and come back and talk to us about how, this gave them the clarity to complete their advanced directive, that they have had these conversations with their kids, they've been playing the game. And so we wanted something that was a little bit lighter and honestly a little less touchy-feely in the questions so that people who might not dive deep into profound questions would be willing to answer a multiple choice question and get the conversation going that way with a group that might not otherwise talk about these topics.
So this is designed for a family, right? A family get together.
Family get together, friend get together, advanced care planning workshops. People are using it to kind of get the conversations going. Death doulas or end of life doulas who accompany people as they're dying, hospice and palliative care. All sorts of professionals use the tool as well. We also created an end of life deck, which is has a little koala on it instead of the skull of the death deck that you showed in yours. And so it's a softer version of the deck and gets into more questions about end of life preferences. So that's the one that I use with my hospice patients the most.
Yeah, here's the end of life deck. I have both.
You have both.
I have
Yay.
all hands on deck, so to speak. I'll get rid of that metaphor. I got to ask you, as part of our work in Jewish sacred aging, obviously these conversations come up all the time and scenarios. But in the last 4 or 5 years, at least, there's been an explosion. That's rabbinic hyperbole, a increase in the number of organizations, the Shomer Collective, Da'at, Kavod B'Nechum, some of the spinoffs of all these who are focusing on aspects of end-of-life care, having the conversation project, et cetera, et cetera. So the difference with what you're doing is sort of like trying to make it a game and bring, I think you just said, some quote fun into this very, very, very serious conversation. Am I correct on that?
You're correct. You're correct. We're trying to appeal to a demographic that responds more to humor and lighter conversations, as well as I think there's just so much value of all the ways that we can approach this topic. You know, there's now podcasts and movies and documentaries and tools like mine of a deck of cards. And I think the more ways we can approach mortality awareness, death awareness, planning ahead for your future, the more people we can get to pay attention. So I see it as one tool or one way to help people have these conversations. And of course, there's so many others that are in this space that are doing incredible work too.
Okay, I have my deck.
Mhm.
Okay. And how does one get, we don't go to a death and dying store, and probably this is not at Target. So how does one, well, that's not a bad idea. How does one get, when somebody's listening to this, watching this, say, well, I think I'll explore this. How does one get it and what does it cost?
So you can go to Amazon and get it.
Amazon.
Which, you know, some people prefer that. You can also get it at our website, thedeathdeck.com.
Okay.
And so both of those are selling the death deck. The end of life deck is currently only on our website, thedeathdeck.com.
It's the death deck, one continuous word.com.
Correct.
And I go to the great God Amazon and I put in the thingy, the death deck. It comes up for you. How much does it cost?
$29.95.
Okay. So I get this. I order this. I'm having my friends over. My family's coming over for Labor Day barbecue.
Mhm.
And I say, I have a great idea. We're going to play a game that's going to talk about my wishes when I die.
Mhm.
Now, the obvious response from many people's brothers, sisters, children is, oh, I forgot I have an appointment. I'm out of here. But we sit down and there's instructions on how to play this. And you pull up a card, and it has a series of questions. For example, I just pulled this up. When I can no longer tell you what I want to hear, please play A, my all-time favorite music playlist, B, audiobooks or inspirational words. No. 3, the sounds of the ocean or a river with a bedpan nearby.
See, there's the humor.
No, yes, yes. So this is and I just pulled this out at random.
Mhm.
This is a typical, and then the goal being then, well, what would be on your playlist, Dad?
Correct.
Right? So
Yeah. Yes. And, with your how to approach this and talk to, get your family on board. Um, well, everyone knows their own family best, so they know what strategy might work for them. But I often encourage people to say, okay, humor your dad, humor me. I've got this. Like in your case, I just did this podcast with this crazy lady who created this game, and and I let's say we're gonna go through 4 questions, and then we'll move on with our day, and and set the parameters that you just want to dabble in it, because what I have found is that by far the majority of what happens is people think they don't want to talk about these topics, but they have a lot of thoughts and opinions.
correct.
And sometimes what people will do is play with their friends first, because sometimes you can get your people of your own age, whatever age that is, to engage with you in something more than your children who are thinking about your death or what that is going to feel like for them, which can kind of elicit more emotional response. So if you play with friends, or then you can kind of also talk about that experience with your kids and how now you want to, share some of those thoughts with them, and or play with them too. So when we first started playing and hosting these game nights and conversations, I had, selected 20 questions for the 2 hours,
Mhm.
and we got through like 3 or 4
Oh yeah,
because
that doesn't. That leads me to my next question. Here's the death debt. So this is not one evening. This is like just a lifetime. So how do you walk me through? Somebody's looking at this or listening to this, and they say, okay, this is way more than 52 cards, like a normal deck of cards. It looks like easily 100 cards. Um, how do you make the decision? Do you do this totally randomly? If you have 6 people, do you to deal out 6 cards to each person? How would you, as the inventor and owner of this, how do you suggest that somebody do this?
yeah, so I would say, first of all, if you want to play the game as a game, um, there is a scoring sheet that you can download, and it's basically you partner up with someone that knows you well, and you try and guess each other's answers, and then you get a point for each time, so that you're correct. So if I'm guessing your answer and you're guessing my answer, we're scoring points based on whether we get correct or not, which, by the way, people don't do well with the scoring aspect of this game because people don't really know most people don't know what their family members would answer.
Right.
So I think that way gamifies it a little bit more, and that can bring in people who wouldn't want just a talking game, but they're actually trying to guess each other's answers. So that's the most playful version, I would say. And then um, most people use it as a conversation starter. And like you said, one of the best ways to do it is to dole out a few cards to each person and kind of go around and take turns asking. And then, people chime in as they as they want to participate, depending on the size of the group. But again, in my experience, once somebody says something, people either align with it or they have a totally different response that they really are eager to share. And so the other real benefit that I wasn't expecting when we created this game was this is a connection building activity. And so you feel really close to people once you've delved into these topics. And so I find myself feeling very connected and close to strangers, even when we have some of these meaningful conversations and storytelling and that sort of thing. So it's also a way to kind of strengthen those relationships that you have to get into some meaty topics, which I know you do in your work, of course.
So we're making an assumption that I can, bring my kids together or my brother or my sisters or whatever. One of the rapidly growing phenomenon and cohorts as a benefit of the longevity revolution or whatever is that there's this increase in what is called solo agers, people who have no family and whose friendship cohort are their age and who are so would you modify this? I mean, though somebody would say to you, but I have no family, I have no spouse, I have no children. And the people I'm friendly with are all dealing with the same stuff. And we don't necessarily want to, if I say this person is going to be my power of it, they may die before I. How adaptable, or is this adaptable to this growing cohort?
Yeah, that's a very good point about solo agers. I know it is something that is getting more attention lately, which is incredible because we need to create some systems in place to help support people who are solo agers. The game, it is adaptable. First of all, I have lots of people who tell me that they go through the questions on their own and use them as journal prompts. So there's those opportunities. When we're getting to the point of who could be your decision maker and that sort of thing, I do encourage friends, to choose a close, trusted friend. And I know that this is easy to say and not always easy to do, but I talk all the time about forming relationships with people of younger and older ages, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so in my viewpoint, one of the strategies of having the death you want as a solo ager is to be nurturing relationships with people younger than you, to be honest. And I know that seems kind of cold and calculated and overly practical, but that's the reality of the situation, Now, of course, some people are a very healthy 75-year-old and some people are very, debilitated at that point. So the age isn't always the most important thing either. But having backup people obviously is important on your advance directive so that if something happens to the first person you choose, you have someone else in place.
Have you experimented with any games with younger people, like in their either college age kids or their 20s or 30s? I mean, people my kids' age, let's say, who are into spectacular denial. But have you had experience with that, and what's that reaction been?
I have been guest lecturing at a death and dying class at a local college, and the response from the college students is phenomenal. They have so many opinions and haven't really talked about this topic much before. And so my teenage son and his friends have played it since they were about 11. And
Control group. That was one of the control groups.
yes, and they have a lot to say too. I mean, I think young people have a lot of opinions and they're eager to begin exploring different topics. The other thing is that millennials are actually the number one group doing their wills right now, above older adults. And so there is some, with the state of the world and where different generations are kind of landing and how they're feeling about the future, there's been an uptick in younger people planning more for death and wanting to have these kind of conversations. Now, granted, there's of course also a generation of baby boomers aging where we really need to get these conversations, begin these conversations if they haven't started, because that's a lot of people to sort out what their wishes are and caregiving plans and all of those things. But the other thing I was going to say is I tell people to stack the deck. So if you want to get your family to play, I would start with questions that are like far removed from personal preferences on end of life and more like, do you think mediums can communicate with the dead? Right? So you're coming, or do you think that people can communicate after they're gone, and how would you show up for other people in a sign or symbol? Or would you live in a house that someone was murdered in? So you can kind of go a little more abstract, and those questions tend to bring in a younger generation, and then they always go to real topics, even if you start with a playful or a somewhat less specific question.
I will tell you then, more and more, I'd say in the last 5 years, maybe it's partly pandemic related, and no doubt some of it is. But when I go and when I'm teaching either in person or on the Zoom machine and ask the question, and obviously the predominant age cohort of the audiences that we deal with are people over the age of the AARP group and older. The majority of people now have advance directives and have signed their documents, and increasing numbers that I've run into have done pre-need because they saw what happened with their parents.
Yes. Yeah.
And they say, I don't want to be the B word, the burden, but also it's just a lot easier to get it over with. And assuming they have the finances, which is another whole issue altogether. And I can see where the deck could be very, very helpful to those individuals in their 40s, early, say, 50s, who have healthy parents, but whose parents have done this, but now say, you have to start taking a look at this. Likewise, when you talk, one of the reasons why I wanted to raise the kids, teenagers today are not immune to having friends die, dealing with none. I'm not talking about necessarily their grandparents or their parents, God forbid, but their cohort, their age cohort, either in drug issues, automobile accidents, diseases, and if their reaction may be a lot different than somebody who's 85 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But the sense, as a social worker, that sense of loss and what do I mean in this grand scheme of things? So are those types of questions also included in the deck?
Yes. Yes, they are. And, what you bring up is there is more evidence of death anxiety at early ages, young adulthood. And that has been increasing partly because of more young people dying and that effect that you're talking about. It's also this idea that like, I have so much more that I want to do, and I'm now afraid that I'm going to die, and so people have reached out to us to tell us that the death deck has helped them with their death anxiety, because having these conversations and talking about it, anytime we talk about something, it lessens the power on it.
Oh yeah.
And so I think there's a lot to just practicing talking about death and dying and how that helps have less fear around it.
you were talking about, you alluded to the fact of this death anxiety. I'm a big believer and have read, just sitting right behind me. Um, and in interest of full disclosure, the death anxiety is something that, as my friends know, I deal with all the time as I get
Mm,
older.
mm,
So in reading the books by Irving Yalom, the therapist, the Becker book, The Denial of Death, this death anxiety is, I believe, it's inherent in every single human being until we either give ourselves permission to talk about it. But I know the older we get, that becomes more of a reality because it's just so much more present. We're just dealing with so much more illness and so much more death if we're given the gift of life. But there still seems to be in the culture, still, we have all these organizations, we have all these tools, but really, we don't want to deal with it. So, as someone who's producing tools to help people deal with it, who has experience in hospice, LCSW, certainly have the professional and personal gravitas. Is America still kind of a youth-oriented society? We still haven't, even though the boomers really want to control even how we die.
yes, we're still a death avoidant society. And, I spend so much time in this space that I start to think, oh, well, everybody knows these things. And then I go back home to my small farming community in northern Michigan where I grew up, and people look at me like, what are you talking about? So we're making progress, that's for sure, in terms of having more conversations. I've had the opportunity to be in articles for Yahoo News and Fortune Magazine and some of these mainstream media. They are talking about this topic, which, I think is the slow way that we change as a culture, is just bringing more of these conversations to the mainstream. So we're not just preaching to the same choir of people who are, aware and interested in this topic and really understand the need for it, that we're reaching a larger mass. But to your point, I've watched a lot of tech companies come into this space and fizzle out in certain, in the time that I've been doing the death tech since 2018. And, you know, the idea is there's so much of a need, but that doesn't mean that people are actually going to do it anyway, you know? And that's where I think all of these different ways that we can each be contributing can kind of help move the needle. But it's going to take generations, I think, to
Wow.
really shift things, So I spend a lot of time, I talk about death and dying all the time with my kid. So, I think if we can demonstrate more comfort with death and dying, which again, understanding that we may be fearful of it happening to us, but we can also still talk through it, then we're kind of modeling that for our kids and grandkids and those around us, so that maybe we'll be passing on less of the death avoidance.
Lisa Pahl, the owner of Death Deck. The website again, if somebody wants to, get involved with this, order it, learn more about it, learn more about what this is all about. What's the website?
TheDeathDeck.com, all one word.
Listen, best of luck with this. It's very exciting and an attempt to really it's really just shift the culture around these conversations, which are necessary for everybody.
Mhm.
And continued good luck. I wish you well. It's just stay healthy. That's the most important thing right now. So thank you
Thank
very much.
you. And
Good luck.
thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, thank you. Our pleasure. To all of you, thank you again for joining us on today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. Again, if you'd like to contact us for any information or suggestions, just email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. Go visit the website, jewishsacredaging.com. There you'll find a very conveniently located donate button. All you have to do is click on it, follow the prompts, and if you'd like to help us and support the work of these podcasts, we really, really do appreciate it. Seekers of Meaning is produced at the Broadcast Center of Lubetkin Media Companies here in beautiful Southern New Jersey. And a big shout out to our captain and producer, Steve Lubetkin. Till we see each other again on the next Seekers of Meaning, thank you again for your time and for joining us. We wish you well, stay healthy, and most of all, be kind to one another. Shalom.